Season 5 of Binge O'Clock Podcast will be discussing The Terror, an AMC show based on the book of the same name. Although The Terror is a fictionalization of real events, the material depicts medical, survival, and supernatural horror, as well as racism, misogyny, gore, and violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden. I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle Nga, and I've seen almost nothing.
I'm Nella, and I'm 100% here for Good Sir's journey of choosing to do no harm, but take no shortage.
Correct.
I love the Good Sir we get in this episode. Absolutely love it.
I love how as things get worse, he really blossoms into his own. I am so grateful for this journey he's having.
And listen, Fitzjames is definitely winning me over, but I think my favorite is still Good Sir.
No, Good Sir is still our good boy, and we love him. All right, who wants to do the recap courtesy of Wikipedia for this one?
Danielle, why don't you take
I'm
this
happy
one?
to try. I feel like I have to try to redeem myself. Let's see if I can read through a single paragraph without making a mistake. What do we think?
I believe in you, Danielle. I believe in you. You've got this.
I'm so used to reading picture books. Where are the pictures? Just kidding. Okay. Okay, so courtesy of Wikipedia, here's the summary for episode 5 titled First Shot of Winter, Lads. The Erebus's naval surgeon's mate, Dr. Goodsir, speaks with
He's
Lady
not a
Silence.
doctor, though. Oh, the Wikipedia is wrong. I'm going to flip every
Wikipedia
table.
says doctor. I'm just reading it.
Call out Wikipedia.
This is a call-out post. Okay, no, just keep going. It's fine.
Okay,
He's the doctor of our hearts.
The doctor of our hearts. He would like to be. Oh, that scene he gets with the. Okay, the Erebus.
Yeah, we'll get to it. This is great. We're already off the rails. I love this for us.
Okay, the Erebus's naval surgeon's mate, Goodsir, speaks with Lady Silence in an effort to learn her language, but has little success learning about the nature of the creature. Crozier becomes temperamental as his liquor supplies run out, and sends his first lieutenant, Edward Little, to pilfer bottles of whiskey from the private stores of Fitzjames aboard Erebus. The creature, revealed as a polar bear-like creature with vaguely human facial features called the Toonbok, attacks Terror and pursues her ice master Thomas Blanky up one of the ship's masts, mauling his legs so severely that it later requires amputation. The men manage to wound the creature with a cannon and it flees, and Lady Silence escapes during the commotion. Crozier resolves to go sober, delegating command of both ships to Fitzjames while he suffers through alcohol withdrawal.
Good job.
Good. Thank you. I'm surprised that Wikipedia lists this as the episode that reveals the creature is the Toonbok.
I
feel like we knew that.
It ultimately comes down to, I always wonder about these summaries because it's how much do you think people are watching the show versus just reading about the show? Mm-hmm. And I get that you don't want to reveal everything in every summary, right? We didn't reveal that Gore dies in the summary from I think it was episode 3, but it comes down to this interesting sure, yeah, okay, I guess that's what happens. Yeah, no, fine. This, by the way, listeners, is why you don't often hear Danielle and I give an actual account of plot-by-plot summary, because it's hard. It's hard to pick and choose.
Now, to be fair, I guess, to the wiki summary, this is the first episode where we get our first full look at the creature and confirm that it is, in fact, polar bear-like. Although, that was the assumption that we were operating under for the first half of this series.
Yeah, but it's not right. Something's not right.
Not right.
Yeah. My favorite thing, we could get into that real quick, but my favorite thing about looking at the Toonbok is his face.
Yeah.
His face is so human.
Yeah.
There's human, I feel like I know that dude. There are human features in that face, and it messes with me every single time.
I'm interested to see how it changes over time, since you told me to keep an eye on it. And this is really, like I said, our first really good look.
Yeah. Keep an eye for sure on his his coat also, and the way Toonbok carries himself, because it becomes I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but it becomes obvious that as the men are quote unquote eaten by the Toonbok, played with, and then their souls consumed. I don't know. It's not real science. I don't know what he does. It's weird and confusing. But like as that happens, the Toonbok itself looks more and more sickly. You'll see.
Interesting.
And it's like he starts acquiring like wear and tear. Now, you could argue that he's set on fire in this episode, and that's what includes wear and tear.
Set on fire and then shot at with a cannonball.
The important thing is this episode establishes that it can be hurt. This isn't like the unkillable creature of the book. But most importantly, even if we're trapped in the ice and we're being hunted by a possibly mystical creature of supernatural origin, science must be done. And we are out there in 52 negative degrees.
Yep.
Taking the temperature every day.
Atmospheric pressure measurements.
I actually did want to ask about that,
your readings.
Which is like, are they taking readings from a practical standpoint because it tells them like when winter is going to end, etc., or is this just like something they do every day so that
this is something that was part of the exploratory scientific nature of the Discovery Corps. Like the Discovery Service was considered foremost like one of exploration and of scientific inquiry. So like all the Rosses, Crozier, all these people would have been also tasked with be sure to take these measurements every day, log everything you find. They were expected to do everything possible to collect as much data as they could.
Oh.
Risking massive amounts of the amputation of toes, of fingers.
Yeah.
Like it is brutal temperatures to be continuing this sort of science.
How many times a day would they take these readings?
What a good question. I don't have an answer to you, Danielle. I'll have to write that down on an index card.
I just want to know, like, how often are they going out and literally, like, risking their toes in order to take these readings? Because it's not that I don't value science, but there's some version of me that's like, would I, in fact, sit out there until my toes literally fell off in order to gather this data? I don't know.
And especially if the time of that is like 20 or 30 minutes, right? Like we're not even talking about a long amount of time. We're talking about like less than 6 hours and your toes are gone. I'm like, no, I don't care how much money you're going to pay me. No. And those toes are gone for life.
The toes are gone for life, A. And B, as some of the characters point out later in this episode, like literally as they're readying the cannons to fire again, they're like, so what do you think, lads? Have we been attracting the Toonbok or the creature to us this entire time? Or do you think we're scaring it away? And I'm like, well, that's probably an important question.
At this point, it's 50-50, isn't it? For any way it can go. Although I think that's it doesn't matter what it's doing. The important thing is that it's upholding structure when you have nothing else to hold on to.
Oh, fair.
I mean, Fitzjames has this great scene where he has all the new terrors, all the men from the terror lined up, and he's inspecting them. He's checking their hands if they're cleaned properly. And he's writing up the lads that aren't keeping up to standards. Because this is the Queen's Navy, and we might be trapped in pack ice, and we might be being hunted by a supernatural terror, but there are standards, and you have to make sure your hygiene is up to the Victorian standards, and that's probably not anything, but you have to do it.
I like that he points out explicitly to them, like, you have never had more time to make sure that your fingernails are clean, so please do it.
Yeah. Well, he's wearing the shiniest epaulets I've ever seen.
They're so shiny. They're so shiny.
It's so good. But I do think it's a good character note, right, for Fitzjames, because he is a man of action. And if there's one thing we all learned during COVID lockdown, how super important it is to maintain structure if you're somebody who is very active.
Yeah, like some semblance of a routine.
Exactly. Otherwise, you will go crazy. Like
this is Fitzjames.
So, and Fitzjames is stepping into that captaincy, that paternal, I have expectations for you and you need to maintain them, and brings a level of order and to the point where the men who were starting to deal with Crozier's like out of control and they were sensing that, I think it gives them comfort as well. Like, okay, like we can trust the captain. The captain is keeping things orderly. Yep. He has expectations of us. We can relax now.
Right.
I just see him trying to be Franklin, which those are big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
You know. But ultimately, Crozier was never going to try and be like Franklin. And you need a Franklin on this expedition to try and prevent the men from totally gutting you. So.
Right. But even before then, you know, even Fitzjames is struggling with this, knowing that Crozier has checked out and worse. He knows that Crozier is drinking himself into oblivion. And Fitzjames is like, hey, I expect at some point he's going to send his guy over and try to take our stuff from our spirits room. Tell me when that happens. And that day has finally come.
Yes.
And Fitzjames has had it. He says no to the ask. And then not only that, he sends Lady Silence back to the Terror. He doesn't want her on his ship anymore. He doesn't want any part of this.
Right. Well, he says that she's upsetting the men, which I don't know. Well, I have a question about that scene, actually, because when Fitzjames tells Edward, or Lieutenant Little, I guess, however we want to refer to him, to bring Lady Silence back with him because she's upsetting the men, and Lieutenant Little makes kind of a face, and Fitzjames is like, you'll see what I'm talking about. So then Little goes back there and he sees Good Sir and Lady Silence talking, and Good Sir is like creating his dictionary of all of the different terms that she is teaching him and, you know, finding out the word for feet and the word for this and the word for that.
And he's just so happy.
He's so happy. But I couldn't figure out what about her is upsetting the men. So maybe this is a bit of a dumb question, but is it like literally her, a woman's presence on the ship? And what was with all the little trinkets that people were leaving for her and were being taken away?
It's super spelled out in the book, but the men start to think that she is a witch.
Okay.
And that she is tied to the Toomba. And that some men have started taking to leaving her little presents to try to appease her to protect them from the Toomba. And in this scene, Fitzjames is just disgusted by this pagan trying to appease this witch, you know, to spare them. And he sees it as superstitious and ignorant. He can't stop them from doing it. And I think we see this again later when Magnus has trouble bringing the body below deck along with the other dead because he can hear their ghosts. And Irving is very affronted by this, but we'll get to that scene. And Fitzjames just doesn't want this on his ship. It's not good. It's not Christian. And also it's out of his control, right?
Right.
Because if the men are starting to build a mythology in their head, how can you fight that? How can you fight a man's fear that is irrational and deals in the supernatural? You can't, so you have to snuff it out.
Okay, I gotcha. That makes sense.
As soon as something is quote unquote confirmed to them, right? Because like, oh, we left her this gift and the ice broke for a second. I heard it crack. You know, like as soon as something like that happens, it's going to be like, well, now you're contending with belief.
Yeah. And it goes back to what Ross said. You know what desperate men are like.
Yeah.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense because I was a little confused by the scene, but now that you're explaining it, it all falls in place with what we know about Fitzjames, which is he needs to have some measure of control over his ship. This woman is a factor that he can't really deal with, and so he kicks her off, partly also to upset Crozier. I agree with you. And since Good Sir and Lady Silence were, are becoming closer, developing this relationship, as it were, or friendship, I suppose. And
a rapport,
yeah. As Good Sir is creating this dictionary of terms, he asks whether he can go with her over to the Terror.
Yeah. And Joy was asking me, so how does this compare to the book? And, we don't have anything like this in the book because, again, she cannot speak in the book. Her tongue has been ripped out.
Yeah.
The biggest thing you need to know about the book, and I feel like I just need to leave it here in regards to how the book deals with Lady Silence. The book has such corkers as her moon-silvered breasts and discussions about her swear-dropping pubic hair.
Oh, boy.
I think that says it all.
Oh, no.
Also, and we can't state this enough, isn't she a minor?
It's implied that she's a teenager to early 20s. They're not sure because she's
okay,
native,
so she's barely
and they don't
18.
know.
Great. Cool.
Yeah, she's
That's
definitely young. And, you know, having read some very, very racist stuff for the Apocalypse Book Club, like, it just smacks a little too much of the stuff I've had to read for my other podcast. And it just makes me really, really uncomfortable, especially down to, like, how she's unknowable, she's inscrutable, and if there's one word that is on my top 10, think very, very hard before you use this word to describe a person of color.
Yeah.
Inscrutable is pretty high up there.
Yeah. Like, big red flag. It's right up, up there with articulate. Like, if anyone uses the words articulate or inscrutable, it's like, ding, ding, ding. You might be a racist. Did
you really, really, really think about using that word before you did?
Oh, my God. I didn't even think, I don't know if this speaks to the not nonsense I'm reading, but I didn't even think of all those implications.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah. And I think because the show changes her ability to connect to somebody, not through a weird genetic psychic connection like she ends up doing with Crozier, because they both have this, like, magic and ability to communicate telepathically or whatever. The fact that she's able to build a human connection to Good Sir through language and, like, common decency, I think drastically changes why she even tries to help them later on.
Yeah.
Because in the book, she's kind of following them because she senses that Crozier has the same ability she does. So he, in theory, in the future, will be able to connect to the Tombach, right? Because he has this magical ability.
He has the sight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also like that, well, number one, that she can speak. It's literally giving her own voice, which I appreciate.
Exactly.
But number two, I think I even mentioned this to you while we were watching it, having her aged up allows her, sort of takes away some of this, like, mystical indigenous layer of, like, that's the only reason you're here, because you're magic. And instead adds, like, I'm just observant and I understand, what you are going through because you are standing very close to me and I can literally smell the whiskey on your breath.
I don't have to read your mind to read you for filth, Crozier.
Exactly. Is what I'm trying to say. That's what I like. I like that you don't, like, this is a supernatural story and it is a horror story at the end of the day, but, like, not having this weird psychic element, which I'm so glad. P.S. They don't include that in the show.
Love it. Love that for us.
They basically just throw that out with the bathwater. It's great.
Yeah.
But not, like, taking that away and making her way more human is so important to actually having her in the story and having her be like actually doing something about her own story.
Right.
Absolutely. Because in the book, you don't really get the sense that she has a fear of the Tombach. And in the show, they change it. She's afraid of the Tombach. She's afraid she won't be able to make a connection to it. She'll be able to bind herself to it the way that's necessary. She has an empathy and humanity that connects her to Good Sir that just doesn't exist in the book. Instead, in the book, it's Irving. And instead, again, she's just like this mysterious indigenous woman that he has the hots for. So gross. Anyway, moving on.
I'm so glad that was lifted out of this. So glad.
Right?
Okay.
Right?
But to bring us back to the episode, Good Sir asks Dr. Stanley for permission to leave, and we get just probably one of my favorite moments for Good Sir.
Yes. It's Good Sir learning to snap back. It's so good. Of course, when he explains he's gotten the captain's permission, but then Stanley points out, well, you're already packed. Why are you asking me?
Right.
It continues, and Stanley tries to offer a snide cutting remark of, oh, yes, we'll have to send us the invitations to the wedding. Because obviously he's been spending a lot of time with Lady Silence. And of course, for these men, there's no, like, why else would you spend time with a woman aside from...
They're all, like, sniggering about the relationship.
Yeah. And Good Sir just turns and says, has anyone ever invited you to a wedding, Dr. Stanley? I love this for him.
And he He just leaves. And then the other men in the room with Dr. Stanley are like, has he always been that cheeky? And Dr. Stanley's like, no, this is new. It's like,
yeah. And there's like a weird, like, almost like he kind of respects him a little bit now. But I just love that now that Fitzjames doesn't have Franklin to be a catty bitch with, Good Sir is stepping up and taking the mantle of number one catty bitch on the expedition.
I mean,
okay.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
The other thing that pushes the narrative forward is that as the men from the Terror are returning from the Erebus, they have the crate of liquor, which is only rum and gin. Boo-hoo. They have Lady Silence. They have Good Sir. Mr. Hornby just collapses.
Yeah.
And is dead on arrival. They arrive at the ship. Hickey, of course, sees them coming in, picks up on a little bit of gossip, but Hornby's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess his heart stopped, question mark?
And it's awful.
Good Sir MacDonald have that scene. I mean, his heart just stopped. Mm-hmm. And Good Sir is starting to have suspicions that there's something other than scurvy they have to worry about. And that's where the conversation comes of MacDonald, have you noticed a brown line on the gums of their mouths?
Yeah.
And there's the discussion of bismuth, which bismuth is a metal that we use it in Pepto-Bismol for digestive purposes. And having too much bismuth can lead to like kind of a brownish line on the gums. And of course, he points out, it's not the same color, but the presentation of exposure to this metal is the same, but I can't figure out where it's coming from. And MacDonald remembers a paper he once read before about the lead in apple presses leading to people having similar symptoms. But then they're discussing it but can lead, like our water tanks are made of lead? And MacDonald's like, no, but it doesn't affect neutral liquids, fortunately. And just a reminder to anyone who's like, but lead is bad. That, according to the CDC, lead can enter drinking water when plumbing materials that contain lead corrode, especially where the water has high acidity or low mineral content. So, if your water is, more neutral, it's okay. If you're in a Flint, Michigan situation where you're pumping poisonous, awful water out of the river,
right?
And taking that to your treatment plant, you're gonna also bring lead along with you because you have corroded the hell out of all of your pipes.
Okay, that makes sense because then Good Sir and MacDonald, you said was the other doctor's name.
Yes.
So Good Sir and MacDonald are just exchanging theories. And MacDonald is asking all the right questions, right? Like, does this guy drink a lot? Because does he do this? What's his profession? Does he spend time around?
Well, they're having a conversation like two peers and not as, the doctor versus the ignorant, anatomist.
Yeah.
MacDonald treats him as a peer, and he even, Good Sir says, you should call me Harry. And he says, I'm going to start calling you doctor because you're acting like one.
Yes.
And I love that. Oh. I'm so glad Good Sir is now on the Terror where he could be among a nice doctor.
This is a really Good Sir episode. This is actually probably one of my top favorite character setup episodes. I feel like everybody really gets a good shine here. You really get to really meet them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Good Sir apparently in a crisis is just the best.
Yeah. But while we're back on the ship, we're starting to see Crozier's. He's in the thick of his addiction to alcohol, well out of his brown study because he is schwiggity-shwasted. He is drinking heavily.
He's not even functional at this point.
No.
Every time you see him, his emotions are all over the place. He's either too happy or too upset, and he has very little control over himself as a person.
I have to take a little digression here because the first thing he says, I think, when Edward Little enters the room is, "How fares the raft of Medusa?" And I have to take a moment to unpack this because this is tiramisu. The shit has layers. This is so on the nose history wise, and I'm like, who who decided to include this line? Like, I need to go back to the book, actually, and see if it was the author who did it first. But there is a very famous painting depicting this from 1819. But the Medusa was a 40-gun frigate in the French Navy. It fought in the Napoleonic Wars. And in 1816, under the command of French name, under the command of this captain, for some baffling reason, while they're off the coast of Africa, he decides to put this passenger, who is a philosopher and member of the Philanthropic Society, but has no qualifications to guide ships, to help him navigate for fun, I guess. Anyway, so the philosopher completely mistakes what they believe is Cloud Bank to be a Cape Blanco on the African coast. They end up like 160 miles off course, and then they end up in increasingly shallow waters. And supposedly there was a lieutenant who was like, captain, where the water is shallow, captain. The captain was ignoring him to the point where the lieutenant had to like run to the front and like prove how shallow the water was. But by that point it was too late. The captain couldn't turn around. So they run aground about like 31 miles from the coast.
Jeez.
The captain, they run aground at high tide. So you don't even have like the high tide to help lift you. And then the captain refuses to jettison the 14 3-ton cannons. So instead of lightening the load, the ship just settles further into the bank. And they are, at this point, actually they're 60 miles from the African coast at this point. There were 400 people on board. They did not have enough lifeboats. There was space for only about 250 people in the boats. So the crew got on the lifeboats and they built a hastily built raft for the 146 men and one woman, which then immediately the raft was partially submerged once they loaded everyone up.
Yep. Which tracks.
The captain and the crew, the plan was to tow the raft, but after like a couple of miles, they were like, you know what? This seems like it's going to kill us. Let's just cut off the raft. So they cut the lines to the raft, leaving the 146 people to whatever God wills.
Right. And to like float out into wherever.
Yes. So do you know what they had on the raft for sustenance?
Each other.
We're getting there. At first, it was just a bag of ship's biscuits, which was consumed on the first day, 2 casks of water, which were lost overboard when they started fighting, and 6 casks of wine.
Oh.
So as described by the Terror Transcripts, which is a fan blog, by the next morning, there were 127 people, 20 having been killed in the night. The remaining people fought and dozens died trying to stay in the center of the raft as its edges were unstable. By the 4th day, there were 67 people. Eventually, the weak were thrown overboard, and then came cannibalism. The population by the 8th day stabilized at 15, all of whom lived to be rescued 4 days later. And they weren't even rescued by the French because the French weren't bothering to look for them. They were rescued by chance by a ship named the Argus.
Oh, wow. Well, the saddest thing about that is if they just hadn't fought, they all would have survived because it was only 4 days.
But they just, they're on a sinking raft.
Yeah.
They're not crew members. They are normal people who were traveling by ship. Abandoned completely. And there's just like this element of like, so you had poor planning, you had poor guidance, you ended up stuck in a situation, nobody was listening, nobody was coming to help you, and you didn't have enough food. And this is a lot. This is a little too on the nose.
And this is what Crozier is referring to when Lieutenant Little ran through the room.
And, I mean, he's referring to it because now, like, all the terrors have moved over to the Erebus, so now it's overcrowded.
Yep.
So he's making this little quip about, how's, like, the raft of the Medusa?
How long did it take you to think of that one, bud?
Yeah, right?
So true.
But also, like, I'm sitting here like, death is all around you. And I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe you try and crack some kind of joke. But the reply is instantly, by the way, somebody died on our way back.
Yeah.
And of course, like, he gives the customary, like, find his messmates, give him his things, give his best buddy his tobacco, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And then he dismisses people, but keeps Edward back to ask the really important question, did you get my whiskey?
Well, that's what I was about to say. Like, speaking of speaking of being in crisis, like when he finds out that Mr. Hornby is dead, he's less upset about that than he is about the fact that they couldn't get into Fitzjames's personal stores for whiskey.
Yeah, because he is in the darkest moment of his addiction. And Little and Jobson are enabling and covering for him because he's their captain. Yeah. And it breaks my heart. And, Crozier is making his alcoholism everyone else's problem at this point.
Yep.
Easily the shitty thing Crozier does this whole series.
Yeah, I'm glad he comes around at the end of this. But, at this point, he's down to 2 bottles of whiskey. So he tells Jobson to go and grab the 2 bottles for him, and then points to Edward and is just like, and that's your clock. Get me more of this.
Also, and we can't skip over this, but and we mentioned before about the only gin and rum were left.
Yeah, I think we talked about that last time.
Yeah. My father drank gin. I'll shoot myself before I drink gin. My father drank
gin. And there's something so missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
About that comment about being so terribly, horribly drunk that you're not paying attention to the decisions you're making. And you're worried about drinking the same liquor as your father because then you'll really be in trouble.
Yeah. Now, what his issue is with rum, we'll never know.
Rum was just it was the what crew members drunk. I mean, I don't like rum particularly.
He didn't want, you know what it was? I bet if he drank whiskey but avoided gin and didn't drink rum, I'll bet it was that rum gave him more of a hangover because of the sugar content.
Probably.
So he really wouldn't have been functional because he would have just been hungover all the time. Yeah.
Fair, maybe. Okay,
and so as we see by the end of this episode, he definitely chooses not to drink either the rum or the gin. So,
okay, so all of this is happening. Meanwhile, Hickey is up to some shenanigans.
He's trying to figure out his next angle. He's trying to figure out what's going on. They brought, the Inuit woman back. What's up with that? What's up with the captain? Gibson, you have your ear to the ground. Good sir, you're back from the other ship. Oh, thank you so much. You're so kind, good sir, for thinking of me in my pain.
I love that good sir does not fall for this at all.
So good.
He literally looks at Hickey and goes, "Does that really work on anyone, Mr. Hickey?" And shuts the curtain in his face.
Again,
it's the rule of 3. This is the 3rd moment good sir has in this episode, and I am into it.
Yeah. Again, good sir, he is taking the path of do no harm but take no short.
However, Hickey does unfortunately get Gibson to give in to him a little bit by giving him the ring that he pilfered from that other guy.
From Young, I think it was.
I hate it. Yeah.
I know.
I hate it.
Yep.
I hate it so much.
Same.
But again, you see Hickey starting to pull together what will become the mutiny party, because then you have the scene with Manson.
Oh, yeah.
The very large man. He's bringing, the body down to where they're keeping the dead. They're in the coldest part of the ship. They'll be frozen solid. And Manson hesitates on the stair. He doesn't want to go down there. Irving sees this. He comes over, orders him to keep going. And Manson admits he doesn't want to go down there because he can hear the dead down there. This is a big part of the book of trying to get Manson to go down there and do his duty because he was given an order and he can't say no to it. And of course, Irving is desperate to convince him otherwise and is cruel in doing so. And Hickey is the one, Twisty Hickey, comes in with, you just need a lantern. Here, you go get a lantern, Mr. Manson, and I'll grab the body and just meet us down there. It'll be fine, stepping over Irving's orders, but Irving doesn't do anything about it. Hickey diffuses the situation, but now has started getting another person in his pocket for the inevitable mutiny.
Yeah. He's super won Manson over, and I hate it. That's all I have to say about that.
Also, Irving was not very good at helping out Manson.
Yeah.
Because ultimately Irving, black and white Irving was really just but this is your duty, do your duty. And are you telling me you're superstitious? Because you're not allowed to be superstitious.
Not even superstitious. He coaches it as unchristian.
Yeah.
Right? To believe in ghosts. Like,
yeah.
And then threatens to lock Manson in the dead room with the bodies. He's like, your punishment for this is not going to be lashes. It's going to be locked in the dead room with the bodies. And see, like, the mistake he's really made here is the mistake that many a person who tries to watch small children makes, which is like they think that if they escalate and escalate and escalate, then eventually the child that they're dealing with is going to give in. But that's not how this works. That just makes it worse, because then it becomes a power struggle.
Yeah.
This is not the immersion therapy you think it is.
Yeah. But some of the officers really starting to pick up that there is a superstitious fear that is taking over the men, and they are getting frustrated with it. They're trying to counter it, but as long as this danger remains, it's only going to grow.
Yeah. And
the seed has been planted.
Also, and I can't overstate this enough, this is also another sign of possibly lead poisoning, right? Hearing things and hallucinations. Is that not true?
Boy, I really should have
scurvy?
looked up the exact symptoms of, I mean, it does, there's so many symptoms.
I know one of them is like, obviously the poor memory, the line on the teeth, but I think one of them is like seeing things.
Nils Foot here, coming in to offer some clarification of what exactly are the symptoms of lead poisoning, since this will keep coming up. Lead poisoning, boy, what can't that girl do? As Joy said, yes, hallucinations, 100% can be one of the symptoms, as well as blindness of parts of your visual field, blurred speech, blue line along the gum, kidney failures, anemia. You could have neuromuscular things like tremor, pain, delayed reactions, loss of coordination. You could have pain in your abdomen, nausea, diarrhea, or constipation. You can feel tingling in your extremities. You could have the general malaise, fatigue, weight loss. Your skin can take on a pallor and/or lividity. Your central nervous system takes a hit. You can suffer insomnia, loss of appetite, decreased libido. Alright, there is a reason why this fandom has so many fics tagged as erectile dysfunction. And now you know. And now you know. You're welcome. But yeah, heavy metals, they come for you, and they come for you hard. So don't eat them. Don't drink them. Don't eat them. Test your soil if you're gardening in an urban area. And take care out there. Nellis Foot out.
That's maybe that's it, but it's also what Irving said, which is so gross. When he literally says, you're not hearing the bodies trying to get out, you're hearing the rats trying to get in.
He's trying to get in. And I mean, he's not wrong.
Like, there's movement in the room. Yeah, there's movement. It's rats, man. Yeah. That's disgusting.
I just like the you're not incorrect. You're just a jerk.
Okay, so all of that is happening. We already talked about the Marine who's taking care of the guy whose head has been like ripped open. We get that great little scene with him. We get the great scene of the men up on the deck loading the cannon. Like, did we scare the bear away? Are we scaring the bear away, or are we attracting the bear to us? And then we get this pretty epic scene where finally Good Sir and Lady Silence have had a chance to eat and sleep and rest and whatever, and now they're going to visit Francis.
Yeah, he invites them to the great room for tea because he wants to get to the bottom of what this creature is and how do they stop it.
Yes, tea literally and figuratively.
Yes, piping hot tea.
Piping hot tea. His desk has because the ship is tilting. I think one of my favorite details about the room is that two of the legs of his desk are like up on books, and his desk is like literally held in place by a rope that's attached to the ceiling.
I love it. It's so good.
To keep it from sliding all over the place.
I know.
It's one of my favorite things because it's obviously as the key, and this is just evident in the script and the cinematography. It's like as the terror starts to list, Crozier gets more and more and more. He is slowly losing his grip as the ship slowly tilts in this direction. And I love it so much. But yeah, so Lady Silence is brought in. They questioned her, and at first it's somewhat respectful. I do love the moment that Crozier has with Good Sir just before, where he's like, let's try together. You know, like, Good Sir's like, I think we should talk about it on her time, sir. I don't think she's going to talk about the what's happening. Like, it seems like it's a private thing. And Crozier's
it's
like,
a closed practice.
Yeah, it's a closed practice. And Nella and I both screamed at the screen, it's a closed practice, shut up. It was like, we have to know what's killing the men. And like, it's interesting. I understand both sides of that. I feel like I get both. Crozier's like, yes, but I still need to know what's killing my men.
Yeah.
And if there's anything we can do to literally survive, for the ice to kill us instead. Like,
yes. And listen, as irritating as Crozier is being in this scene, you're right. I get it, why he's so desperate, because it's been a month. It's not like he put them together in a room for an hour and then was like, all right, man, where's the information? He let Good Sir spend a month getting to know Lady Silence and talking to her. And Crozier's like, so what have you been doing for a month? And they've just been, they've just been talking about everything and nothing, right? Their clothing, the weather.
He's just slowly been learning the language in that way of like,
he's been writing his dictionary. Although what a good line from Crozier of, I hope you live to sell your dictionary, Mr. Good Sir. I hope I live to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we do get from Lady Silence that the creature's name is, well, no one can pronounce it correctly. She says a word and they land on Toonbuck.
Yeah. Closest they can get.
Yeah. Blanky feels he knows of a word similar or that same word from the what would be the Yupik people of Alaska and the Bering Strait into Russia. Mm-hmm. Now, do you remember the mask that Shaman was wearing in the vision that Young had before he died? Yeah, so that style of mask is based on the Yupik tradition, which is that, those people of that region. And that mask represents a Toonrak, which is a shaman's helping spirit. So it's depicted with like a semi-human face. It has wooden peg teeth, a blood-spattered mouth. It's very much from that culture. And they've sort of, again, melding different Arctic Inuit traditions to sort of inform this supernatural made-up version of something. Mm-hmm. But even Blanky says it's Crozier who's just like, well, we don't know it's the same thing because it's translated
that may
as
not
a
be
spirit,
what it means.
A spirit that dresses like an animal, and he's like, we don't know if it means the same thing.
Like the immediate,
don't tell the men that.
Exactly, that was my favorite. Like the immediate, don't tell the men. Yes. Because they're already panicking and they're already just making this out to be not quite what it is. Although they actually are more on the money, I think, than Fitzjames, Irving, and Crozier would like.
Yeah. But again, you have like these three different officers' takes on how to deal with this. Fitzjames throws her off the ship. Irving yells at a man and tries to bully him into like ignoring his own fear. Mm-hmm. Crozier's like, don't you dare tell the men.
So Good Sir keeps insisting that Lady Silence requires or responds to a lighter touch, and Francis isn't having it. Partly because he's desperate, partly because he's drunk. And finally, he looks at her and says, how do you do it? How do you kill the Toonbuck?
Yeah, that's not a lighter touch, Francis.
Nope. No, it's not. But Good Sir refused to ask the question himself, and so Francis asked the question. She just isn't responding to him.
Although I'm not 100% sure that Francis had enough Inuktuk to actually ask that.
Yeah.
Well,
which I think also was the dig.
Right. Yeah. That's fair.
P.S. When I look at Lady Silence, when he says, "How do you kill it?" to Good Sir, mm-hmm. I see Lady Silence recognition of she understood what he said.
Yeah,
like in English, like she caught it.
So then he finally asks her the question. She's refusing to respond. She's not cooperating, right? And so he starts getting in her face. He starts getting physical. She still isn't answering him. And finally, he snaps. And he is the one who kicks who kicks her off the ship and says, well, fine.
Or threatens
if
to.
you're not going to cooperate with us, then you're not going to get our protection anymore. And I thought it was interesting that everyone in the room, including Lieutenant Little, who hasn't been very sympathetic with her to this point, is like, wait, what?
Yeah.
They all protest.
Good Sir, of course, jumps in with she's been with us a month. She's never tried to leave. Like, there's like, why would she? And then Blanky is, did you ever ask yourself why? She's frightened of it also. Blanky is very intuitive.
Very,
and I
very.
love that for him. And in this like heated moment, finally Lady Silence speaks, and she rips into Crozier.
Yes.
Absolutely loses her temper, just drops that bomb. And I don't know if you wrote it down, because I didn't write it down because I was too busy watching the screen in delight.
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Lady Silence snaps. And actually, as soon as I'm done reading it, I want to hear, actually, before I even read it, in the book, just out of curiosity, was this all just projected psychically, or did the show write these lines?
No, this never happens this. No.
Okay.
No,
great.
if anything, I don't even really remember, but if anything, it's probably Crozier in one of his, like, fever dream psychic projections being like, why did we ever come here? Like, kind of thing. But I love that they've given it to Lady Silence. And I don't even want to say, you know what? I don't even want to say she snaps.
Yeah.
If anything, her response is so clear-sighted and just, she's angry, but, like, she is in control of this. It is a righteous anger.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like you have asked, because she says something when he says help us.
Yes. Okay.
That is when she responds. So it's not I'm going to throw you out. It's like, no.
Yeah. Okay, so in response to help us, she says, and who is going to stop you? You use the winds to carry you here. You use the forest to hide inside. You use all this and don't even want to be here. You don't want to live. Look at you. Even if I could help, you don't want it. Why do you want to die?
She cuts to the heart of what's wrong here.
Yeah.
So, like, it's, she hits bone. Like, it's amazing.
Sharp as the toonbox claws.
His face is falling apart in front of her. He knows that she's right.
Yeah.
And then Fitzjames interrupts.
Drama Llama Fitzjames knows exactly when to make an entrance, and he shows up just when Blanky reiterates what she has said, why do you want to die? And Fitzjames is just like, I came here to cause a fight, and I'm not quite sure I walked in with, but I'm sticking to my original plan, which is...
Which is, you tried to steal liquor from me. Account for yourself, Crozier.
And I'm going to yell at you in front of all these officers about how you keep morbing on about what's your due.
And he's
morbing.
Like,
I love it.
And he's like, dude, you're the captain. You are in charge of this whole expedition. What do you mean what you're due? This is it. Right? And then he tells him, if you want respect, you need to earn it.
Even worse, he takes Franklin's words as he says, are you determined to be the worst kind of first as well?
Yeah.
Because again, Fitzjames was privy to what Franklin did,
to his dress down.
Yes. And he uses Franklin's words as a knife twist, but he's not wrong. and then with the respect, you have to earn it. Then Crozier tries to throw hands poorly because he's drunk.
Blanky
he
pulls
gets in
him
one
off.
good slap.
He does. He does get like one little.
He gets in like one good slap.
Doesn't even draw blood. Like Fitzjames is like, what?
Fitzjames has probably taken face plants harder than that.
Seriously, it was like nothing. And then this is where we enter basically the act 3 of the show. And ultimately, what eventually leads Francis to his come to Jesus moment at the end of the episode, because in a fit of rage, as Thomas or Blanky pulls Francis off of Fitzjames, Francis orders Blanky to go and stare at the ice. and return in an hour with a full report. And that's why Blanky goes outside.
Yeah. Well, because Blanky makes the mistake of treating him still as a friend and not as his captain, where he says, remember John Ross and Fury Beach.
Yeah.
He's trying to warn him, but Crozier is so drunk and so furious, he pulls the captain card and orders him on deck, right? And Blanky gives him a captain and goes to, fine, stare at the ice. Oof.
Which
now Fitzjames stays behind to continue to fight it out, and Joy was like, "Oh, to be a fly on that wall," and I'm like, "Fix on it." The fan fiction is on it, but yes. We don't stay there.
I know we haven't really touched on fan fiction a lot for the Terror season 1, but it is hot for Crozier and Fitzjames.
Oh
the
my God.
fandom is on it, is in it, is all around it, is serving. Apparently.
Yeah, they are, it is their bread and butter for sure. But anyway, so
how do we
just walks right into a Toonbok attack.
Yeah.
Oh boy. And it is brutal instantly.
Yeah.
Because like he gets on deck and I think he barely even has time to like get off the ladder up top before someone is like backing away from the tent.
Yeah.
And it's too long to go into a play-by-play, but essentially the Toonbok is on one side of the ship, they're on the other and trying to stalk it, but the Toonbok is too clever and too quick.
Yeah. I mean, so some things to keep in mind for this fight is that in the initial attack, something falls on top of the hatch. So now no one can come on deck to follow the men and try to help the men who are on deck in their watch. Right. The other entrance has been sealed at this point to help keep draft out. So they are running to the other side of the ship, trying to pretty much chip it open so they can get on deck. Meanwhile, in the cabin, the men on the deck are trying to figure out where the Toonbok is. They're facing the wrong direction. That's where Jobson realizes, and we see a glimpse of it in that main room of the Toonbok climbing up. Jobson yells, coming up the stern. Crozier manages to get that information to Blanky through the broken glass of the hatch. Blanky gives the direction of where it's coming. You know, the Marines, Tozier is up there. The other Marines are up there trying to take shots at the Toonbok, but there are 2 men up there who don't have firearms. So Blanky tells them, get off the ship, run, hide in the ice. And then Blanky makes the decision, like he finds himself pretty much face to face on the deck with the Toonbok. And he decides to go up the rigging to draw the Toonbok away from the 2 men who are hiding on the ice.
Oh, it's so good.
And it works.
Oh, I mean, works-ish, right? Son. Because, like, I think that there was some part of, I don't know if he was hoping for this, but I certainly was. There was some part of me was hoping that the Toonbok couldn't climb. And so there's this great reveal where Blanky's like making his way up towards the crow's nest at the top of this mast, and he gets himself up into basically this platform that's in the middle of the mast before you get to the crow's nest. I don't know what that's called. And he just like... There's this moment of relief, actually. He leans back onto the platform. He's like, I made it. He fully takes off one of his gloves. And then the whole platform shifts. A lantern falls. He looks down, and it's like, oh, the thing can climb.
We see the face of the Toonbok.
We see the face. It's climbing. It's coming.
For a split second.
And he's like, oh, so then he's got to keep going. It's great. And I actually love how he kind of MacGyver's his eventual rescue. He's so smart. Like, essentially what he does is the Toonbok is following after him, right? So he goes out onto part of the mast that's, I guess, perpendicular to the ground. And before getting there, he like takes a bit of lamp with him, which part of me was like, ooh, wonder what's going on here. The Toonbok like slices his leg. He wraps himself in rope so that he will not fall to his death from the mast, and then lights the Toonbok on fire so that all of the men who have now made it onto the deck can actually see it and fire it with a cannon. Because, surprise, it's the middle of a storm, the middle of the night, it's white, no one can see it.
Yeah, first shot's a winner, lad.
First shot's a winner, lad.
It's so
and
good.
They do connect.
Yeah, and it hurts. It actually makes the Toonbok bleed. The Toonbok and Blanky fall, but he again is caught in the rope around his bad leg, but that leg's not long for this world anyway. They managed to pull him down. You know, I just want to hit on the difference from from the book. Okay. Because the book, this is much longer, the fight. He actually takes a flying leap off the ship. And there's a great quote of the Ice Master knew as he fell that his life now depended upon simple Newtonian arithmetic. Thomas Blanky had become a minor problem in ballistics. He lands on the ice. He actually, it's implied he breaks his leg. But in his like adrenaline, when the Toonbach roars, he manages to get up and he's trying to remember, why did I do that in the first place? And then his instincts were, he remembered something that Good Sir had said about polar bears, which is that on open plain, they can run up to 25 miles per hour. And as the Ice Master, and it's so good, even in winter, there were hours on watch in moonlight and starlight in the glow of the dancing aurora where he'd studied the circle of ice around the trapped ship with an Ice Master's professional eye. He remembered a maze of former bergy bits, small icebergs calved with their larger brethren, upended into a tiny mountain range of cottage-sized ice boulders. He knows instinctually the Toonbach, if it is a polar bear, will never pick up speed in a maze like that, and he might survive. Oh. So he gets up on a broken leg, and he runs for it, and the Toonbach is hunting him in the maze. He ends up throwing himself into this tiny little hole. Yeah. He has to remove clothing to fit. So now, not only does he have a broken leg, he's probably going to freeze to death. He is fighting to squeeze his way through his hole. That's when the Toonbach slashes his leg as he tries to drag him out, but he's able to, like... It describes how the blood actually slicks up the hole and he slides into it. Huh. And he ends up in this like tiny open-aired kind of room where he can see the stars and he realizes the Toonbach cannot get to him. And he knows he's going to die.
Oh my gosh.
So he sits there preparing to freeze to death, wondering if his fellow terrors would ever find him. And as he starts like falling into the stupor of, you know, freezing to death, here's the quote. It's so good. The thing was using torches and lanterns to fool him into coming out, but he wouldn't fall for that old ruse. He would stay silent until the light went away, until he slipped that last small bit into soft eternal sleep. He would not give the thing the satisfaction of hearing him speak now after their long, silent duel. God damn it, Mr. Blanky, boomed Captain Crozier's bass bellow down the ice tunnel. If you're in there, answer, God damn it, or we'll just leave you there. And Blanky survives. He does loses the leg, but that's how the scene ends. Yeah. Like, it's this whole chase because the book is, I think, better at establishing that the Toonbach is playing with its prey.
Yeah. Well, you know, I love the scene that we got in the show, but I'm kind of sad that we didn't get this one. Like, Blanky running through a maze of ice? Why did the writers elect not to give us that?
I mean, honestly, it drags it out too long is my instinct. To film it.
And also you lose the sense of urgency if you take him off the boat and then have to bring him back to the boat to get the surgery to remove the leg.
Yeah, and I think then we would miss that scene where they're preparing for amputation because, like, the muscle's all torn, there's no way to save it. And they give him cocaine in wine form. And also they're like, all right, now give him a lot of alcohol because we got to cut it off. And Crozier's like, wait, he runs, he gets his last bottle of whiskey.
Last bottle.
And Blanky goes, no, wait. And I was, honestly, the first time I saw it, I was waiting for the, no, you need it more than I do. Instead, he's like, we're all taking a shot.
Because I feel like we're married in a way, this thing like, and I
feel I had a real connection with that creature. I feel like we're engaged now and I want to celebrate.
There's something about Blanky that just I would die for Blanky. Like, I don't know.
No, I mean, again, Blanky's pretty high on my top favorite terrors.
Yeah.
So in all the chaos, Crozier does see Lady Silence get the hell off this ship.
Yep, bye-bye.
In the chaos. Yeah, no, I'm not hanging around for this.
No. And then there's a couple little things that just wrap up the episode, right? So we've gotten through all that. There's the amputation scene, which is harrowing.
Seriously, give that man a moment for the liquor to hit. He's like drinking the bottle while you're like, okay, now lay back so I can cut it off. Hold him down. I'm like, give him 5 minutes for that thing to like loosen him up. Good Lord.
Right? Before you saw through his femur, because that is in fact what they do.
No, they saw off underneath the knee.
Oh, okay.
They're sawing off underneath the knee, yeah.
Oh, so not that much of his leg. Okay, now.
Enough of his leg.
A lot of his leg. He's still got a knee.
They're still cutting off his leg, Danielle. That's not a pleasant experience. And this is like before the American Civil War, where men lost so many limbs during that war. We actually made huge strides in amputation and how to do it properly.
We revolutionized the science of amputation. Hashtag Civil War. Hashtag thanks.
America, throw drop. Yeah.
We're number one. No, just kidding. Okay, so then Fitzjames.
A couple small things, yes.
Fitzjames pays Francis a visit, and Francis is drunk. And the doctor's there, Jobson is there. I think Edward is there too. And at first I thought that Fitzjames was there to just lay into Francis again, but it becomes pretty obvious that actually Francis has called this group together. And in the midst of his, delirium is the wrong word, but it feels close to that. He asks them for a favor, and he says, listen, this is terrible timing, but I'm going to be unwell for 1, 2, probably more time than that.
Weeks.
Yeah. Right? And he asks them, his favor is that they keep his condition a secret, but that they also care for him. And while he's, quote, unwell, he says that he's not going to be fit for command. So he gives Fitzjames control and makes Edward Little his proxy. And then, just gives like a couple little final pieces of instruction, which are to take the last of his whiskey and pour it where the Toonbuck fell. And then he gives his gun to Edward Little and says, don't give this back to me until I'm back on deck in full uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a real shift in the meaning of the pistol from the book, because in the book, the pistol is in his pocket to his plan is when I am out of whiskey, I'm going to put a bullet in my head. And the show doesn't really do that, but I think the show does give the implication of he was keeping the pistol in his pocket. And, was it because it's a symbol of his office? Because technically no one's supposed to have arms on ship aside from the Marines.
Oh.
And as a captain, he can have that pistol. Everything else was supposed to be kept under lock and key rigidly. And but then also, it's a little bit of the symbol of his office and the influence and power he's supposed to have. But also it's a very telling, it might get so bad, I'll want to kill myself. Yeah. So hold on to this for me, please.
Right. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay. So that's one piece of the last part of the episode that ties it up. But the other part of it is Good Sir. Good Sir, who, in the midst of everything else, is continuing his work as a doctor. Because remember how we were talking about lead? He's still on it. Right? He notices that as Lady Silence, I assume, was eating some of the canned goods, she was putting these little bits to the side. I don't know. And he's like, what's up with these? And so he decides to inspect more canned goods. He opens one up. He's kind of looking through it to see what he can see. And then Canary in a Coal Mine gives some to Jacko.
Yeah.
And that's how the episode ends.
Yep. I mean, he has a hypothesis, and now he has to test it. I know. Pour one out for Jacko. She didn't deserve that.
If you're not happy about monkey death, we definitely get some monkey death.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Spoilers, everyone dies.
Everyone dies.
We all die in the end. Yeah. So there it is. One other note before we wrap up entirely. In the book, Crozier deciding to go sober comes after a very different moment. Ooh. Blanky has his close encounter and injury, but it's after the disaster of the carnival that he decides to go sober, and we haven't gotten to that yet. And I'll talk about more of that, I think, when we get to that episode. So
yeah, no, that's interesting that's where the book put it.
Yeah. But
no, I like that the show put it here because Blanky and Crozier are so close, and you're able to really see that relationship. And I think it makes two, I think the book and the show make two different commentaries on addiction and like when people, decide to get sober or, et cetera, or in Crozier's case, forced to get sober. I think it's interesting. Actually, that's my one more thing. I like that the show doesn't really shy away from how terrible and bad addiction can really get, and that, it also affects relationships. I think he was already starting to experience some of the DTs during that meeting, because some of that is like confusion, trembling, like erratic behavior, irritability, obviously, which we've seen this whole time, agitation, aggression. But like he was, like you said, he was like all over the place, emotionally speaking. And like that really came to a head at that meeting in particular of like, and here's the reality of the situation, everybody, and I'm just going to bed. So, whoops, good luck. Check on me in 2 weeks.
Oh, yep.
Like,
and
so
make sure
heartbreaking.
I don't have any liquor. Do you have one more thing, Nella?
I do, actually. So there's a line that Hickey says to Gibson and he mentions the line that he can't cross, but Gibson can. And he's referring to the line between crew and officers, that crew are not supposed to cross without being invited in to either report or for whatever reason. Like,
or
and
fix a
there
privy.
is, I would recommend looking up a series called History Hits on YouTube, because they actually do a series of videos about SS Great Britain, which was the first steamship to cross the Atlantic. It went to New York in 1845. And it was considered like the height of luxury at the time. And it does lay out what the working experience would have been like between an officer and a able-bodied seaman, and like how stark the difference was. So highly recommend checking that out if you're like trying to get a little more of a vibe of like what being in the Navy in the 1840s in Britain or in the the British Empire would have been like. Definitely recommend.
I don't have a one more thing, because I feel like we've talked about everything in the episodes that I really wanted to talk about. So I guess my one more thing is just that I'm very excited to see Fitzjames in charge. James Fitzjames in charge, because his facial expression when Francis finally handed over that title was just chef's kiss. And I'm very excited to see where that goes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we did it, right?
For sure.
Okay. Here it comes. I was like, before I do the sign-off, does anyone have anything? I guess not. So here comes the sign-off. We would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can list the first 10 words you would add if you were creating a dictionary. You can also email us at bingeoclock.com. bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. My goodness. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/clockpod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.
I don't know. I need to think about 10 words. They'll probably all be curses.
I was like,
so,
do you have
there's
your
just
10
one
words,
that was
Nella, ready to
swear
go?
jar. Yeah. No, I don't. But they'd probably mostly be swear jars. Mine would probably like brassicas. Very important. I need to be able to describe vegetables to you.
So brassicas and then 9 swear words.
I mean, that tracks. Coffee, probably. Coffee's very important.
Yeah, I was going to go for like,
I don't know.
help,
it's hard.
bathroom, directions.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're trying to be useful.
Right, but who wants that? What's the fun in a useful dictionary?
I mean, the list of my top 10 movies and TV shows in another language.